the eye of the storm. Oh, Terry, you're so cute. I can't stand it. Just knock it off. You're killing me.
Of course. Take this photo.
No. I'm not shooting at you. Don't touch.
Hi, this is Rachel from RedAnt Fashions. So today we're going to have story time. I am going to share my experiences with you. And today we're going to talk about the Medusa show. We're going to talk about my time that I spent up in Seattle in 2000. It was the end of 2003 and the first half of 2004.
That'd be fine. Yeah. I might put it on. I try to put it on fairly light. Come off pretty easily. Especially if you have a makeup remover. Even if you don't, just like a bunch of warm water and soap.
Pull out the 409 or anything like that.
Although, you know, it might help. Might take off all the skin with it, but, you know, you don't really need that.
Seattle was a strange time for me. I had gone up to Seattle in October of 2003 and I was just supposed to go up for a Halloween fashion show and then I was supposed to come back down, but as it turned out I never left. I was up there for another year. I didn't expect to stay that long. That wasn't my intention, I guess, when I went up there, but that was kind of how it all worked out. I just didn't want to go home. I think part of the reason I stayed up there for so long was I didn't want to go home. I didn't really feel like I had a lot to go home to. There was a lot going on in my personal life that I think I didn't want to deal with or look at, and it was really painful. And it just felt really icky, and I felt very lost and confused and unsure of a lot of things.
What's that? Like something?
What's the driving force?
It's the driving.
Hey Ken, are you going anywhere? Sorry, I forgot to have you sign.
Everybody has a past. Everybody has issues that they're working out. But people do things for certain reasons, whether it's acting out or it's very intentional. But they're constantly trying to express themselves, whether through their actions, their emotions, or with articulating through words or art or whatever it is. Everyone in a sense is telling their own story and sharing their own experiences. And RedAnt very much tells that story through fashion and wearable art.
And what's this? And I have stuff in the front as well. Just stuff over here. Do I need so much though? Maybe I can take more of this right here. And shove it in the face with the yeah. And then more of this in the back of the ponytail. But yeah, okay. There's just lots of this all over. And then some of it goes over and some of it goes under the thing. I get it.
So, what's your role in this whole scheme of things?
Me? Slave labor.
As opposed to quartermaster?
Right? The Medusa show really was my breaking point. It was a breaking, not only was it where my relationship with Blue House Collective really started to crack and crumble at the foundation because I was really going in a different direction than the core people that I was super close with, that were my BFFs, that really started out on this path with me. They were moving in different directions in their own life paths, and I had no direction. I didn't know where I was going. So it was like everything inside of me felt like it was just crumbling, and it didn't make sense. And I felt there was a part of me I think that felt slightly abandoned. I felt left alone in a lot of ways. I felt isolated. I felt silenced. I felt like no one was listening anymore because the people I wanted to actually hear what it was that I had to say were no longer available to take the time for me because they were dealing with their own stuff, with their own lives. So there was that feeling of just like nobody is seeing how badly I'm hurting inside and no one is paying attention to what's going on with me. And I think it went deeper than that.
I don't care. No sneaking.
Yeah. Because
I think it went deeper than that as well, because I feel like it wasn't just about what was going on with me in the present. I felt like no one really saw what was really truly going on with me because no one really truly knew what was going on in my personal life back at home. So I think the people in the present were kind of just thinking that I was crazy and all over the place, and I was. I'm not saying that I wasn't, but I think that why I felt so abandoned and alone and isolated was because what was going on at home wasn't being dealt with. No one in the present was asking questions. No one even took interest in that. So I felt very unseen for the pain that I was carrying that no one seemed to notice. And I felt very unheard because I was in a lot of ways acting out and working out what was going on with me inside. And people just interpreted it as this crazy and creative person that's just neurotic. And they didn't really peel back the layers and take another look at what was really going on and why things were the way that they were.
Symbolic. What? What?
Yeah.
Let's go.
that was good, but this is a little lower.
Yeah. Freeze. Nice. Very nice. Keep freezing. Keep like.
I think in a lot of ways I was thrashing inside myself. There was a lot of just feeling out of control, feeling like things were spiraling. I felt very scared, very alone. For the first time in my life, I felt like I didn't have a purpose. I didn't have anyone to wake up and take care of other than myself, and I really had to face myself, and I really didn't know what to do with that.
Okay. 8 o'clock. That's where I'll be. 8 o'clock.
Ladies and gentlemen, I am officially stuck.
Ooh, good one. Wait, hold on. Hold still.
I was still learning how to articulate and put things into words and identify what it was that I was feeling and understanding what it was. So it was definitely a time in my life where it felt like everything was just exploding out of me. And the only way I knew how to deal with it in any kind of somewhat healthy manner was to create and manifest these creations through my art. And it seemed to be what people wanted me to do, and it was the only thing where I really felt people really embraced what it was that I had to say or took the time to actually listen. I think there was a lot of me that felt very unheard. I think there was a lot of hurt and anger from childhood as well as from what was going on currently in my life that hadn't really been dealt with. I had just lost the use of my legs and everything from the waist down from the car crash, and by 2003 I had regained everything, but I didn't do it very well, but I was learning. So I was up and walking around and running around and stuff, but I was just kind of slow and awkward. But I think there was a lot coming up and purging out of me all at once, and so I feel like I was very much an emotional train wreck. And I felt like emotions and experiences, there wasn't that line. Everything kind of just blurred in together and just like split out into the world.
Oh my god!
those pars aren't on though.
Yeah. Well, this one's supposed to be stuck up in it and shining on.
There were two different entities that really emerged. There was Rachel the girl, and then there was the RedAnt. And the two, though they merged and crossed over, Rachel the girl obsessed over a lot of different things, but she never expressed what was going on personally inside of herself with what was going on back at home with her family, which I think is why it manifested in ways where I obsessed over what was going on in RedAnt and RedAnt's personal life with relationships and men and people in the present. I think it was a way for me not to address what was going on back at home on a more personal, intimate level. I think a lot of that had to do with just avoidance or misdirected frustration or sadness.
Oh, I think that's your time. I'm not sure last time. You did that last time. I think you.
The Medusa show was kind of the beginning of the end. It was definitely the beginning of the end with my relationship with Blue House Collective. During Seattle, you'll see a lot of the outfits that I made. There was a lot of undertones of bondage. I felt very restricted. I think it reflected on how much I felt very bound and restricted within my own work. I really felt like my manifestations were turning themselves into my nightmares, and I felt very trapped and very isolated and alone. I felt like this darker side of myself was starting to come out, and I needed to shackle it down, and I didn't know what to do with it. Of course, the more you try to shackle down that darker side of yourself, the more it emerges and the stronger it gets and the more it wants to break free. And as it does that, you have this duality in yourself where one is trying to overpower the other. And then because it can't find that balance, one eventually just crashes through and it just is like an explosion. And it's an emotional mess to be around, let me just tell you.
That's 80 pictures of you guys. 80.
80.
What do you think? You're satisfied? You had enough of us?
Hell no.
Fine, go for it anyway.
No, I got the.
Oh wait, there
I
was
my
just
son on there. Wait.
Do that again. This camera.
I felt really alone back then. I was surrounded by a lot of people 24/7. I lived in a house full of 6 boys and 1 other girl. So I was always surrounded by people. There were always people coming over to the house and hanging out and playing dress up and helping make costumes and outfits. So I was always doing something, and there was always people around. And yet I think that was the loneliest time in my life. I never felt so alone and so lost. And though I was immersed in this community that really embraced me and I think truly loved me and what I was doing, and there was that sense of community, I felt isolated and alone. And I think a lot of that had to do with what was going on inside me, and I think a lot of it also had to do with what was going on back at home that I wasn't addressing or dealing with, as well as nobody really asked, no one really knew. In Seattle, it was like there was so much going on. There was always a party or an event that I had to make an appearance at, or I was going to play dress up and I was going to bring an entourage of people. I never went anywhere by myself. I was invited to all of the different parties and events, and there was always like 6 or 7 of us together. The girl that was closest to me lived in the house with me, and her and I did become very, very super close, and we almost became like sisters. And there were times where I had to be at a party, or we were planning on going to a party, and everyone was going to get done up in RedAnt. And I remember she used to come up into my room, and I would be passed out from whatever event that we had just gone on and happened the night before or earlier that week. And so I'd be sleeping, and she would sit next to me, and she would do all of my hair and makeup while I was sleeping. And then she would gently wake me up and tell me, okay, it's time to get dressed. And she would pick out clothes and dress me and get me all ready. And then, you know, the rest of the people would show up, and a car would show up, and then they would take us off to the party, and we would go party.
I got this. Good job.
I really did feel like, I think part of me felt like I was becoming something bigger than I really was. I think there was a little bit of over self-importance that was happening. It was definitely very strange times to be that popular or the center of so much attention and not really knowing which direction you're heading. So it's kind of like the blind leading the blind. I didn't really have a direction. I didn't really have a destination. I had no idea what I was doing. I was very much trying to work out my own bullshit inside myself, and yet somehow somebody handed me the torch and said, okay, you're the leader, take us where we need to go. And yet I didn't really feel like I had a goddamn clue of what I was doing or where I was going.
Get those pictures of me standing by the Panasonic. I want to put those up on my website when it's created.
I think in a lot of ways I was dreaming and hoping that someone would just show up and point the direction in which I was supposed to go. I felt like it was just going to happen or manifest itself. I didn't really grasp the concept that just because you can manifest things and give life to things. If you don't have a direction, it doesn't really go anywhere. It just kind of spins itself. You really, I think that's really important to have a part of your vision, is to know where it is that you're going. And I didn't have that. I just had all of this vision. I had all of these visions. I had all the creativity. I had everything but that missing piece of the puzzle of where are we going? Who's leading us down the way? And so it was like the city of lost children. I was just wandering, and all of these people were coming along, and they were a part of the adventure and the journey, but we had no destination. It really was the journey of the fool, except even the fool, though he doesn't know where he's going, is going.
Shannon using that really cool camera with the follow focus in the matte box. Eyebrow.
It was a human sacrifice. That's what the Medusa show was. That's what the Medusa show was all about. It was about being silenced. It was about not being heard, and being a martyr, in a sense. The venue itself for Medusa, it's a club setting. And so there was a stage that was up really, really high, and it's just like almost like a balcony. And then there was a stage down below in the crowd that had this huge screen that divided a wall, and you could project images on it. So we projected all the RedAnt scrap footage onto the screen. You can see it from both sides in the middle of the club. And then we used the platform in front of it as a stage, and we used the balcony as a stage. And so there was 2 different stages going on, and there was a staircase that came from the green room down into the crowd, and that was where we kind of used as a runway. The show started, and Pan came out and awoken the triple goddesses, and then sent them out into the audience and into the crowd. And when that happened, I want to say there was a handful, I can't remember how many girls there were, but there was a handful of girls. Pan is an archetype as well as a symbol. There's a lot of symbolisms in RedAnt fashions, in the fashion shows and in the photo shoots. There's a lot of archetypes that definitely take place. I don't think that it was always methodically thought out as much as they were definitely imageries and philosophies as well as archetypes that I've just kind of resonated with and have always kind of made sense to me, you know, and then you dig a little deeper and you try to understand why. But I mean, since the very beginning, these symbols and images have kind of bled through in RedAnt without even knowing it. So Pan sent the triple goddesses out into the crowd, and I had covered them in the bustles that I make out of shredded fabric and yarn, and we covered them all up, and then they went out to the stage out in the audience and danced to some tribal music, and then did a striptease. And then when they did a striptease, they tore down the layers of shredded fabric and bustles that they were covered in, and they had these beautiful RedAnt outfits underneath it, but they were very much bondaged into their clothes. There was a handful of girls that we had already placed out into the audience, and they were dressed up in RedAnt from head to toe and fully done up. But what I did was, we had the makeup artist Cory who did all of the makeup and hair for RedAnt for that particular show. I believe that Hannah Rames was his assistant, and she did a lot of the hair and helped him. But the majority of the concepts for the makeup and the makeup itself was done by Cory German. He was a phenomenal makeup artist. Beautiful artist, but just the detail was just amazing. He would take people's faces and make them into a blank canvas and then draw this whole other thing on top of it. It was amazing. In the audience, there were this handful of girls. They're done up, but what I did was Cory took grommets and glued them around their face, and then took red yarn and sewed their mouths shut so they couldn't talk, and then he gave them doll-like eyes. And so though they were out in the audience mingling with the crowd while the show was going on, they had to be very expressional with their faces and with their eyes, because that's all they had to communicate with in body language. They couldn't really talk or move their mouth because their lips had been sewn shut. So on the second stage, up top, while the girls are down there dancing, you have these doll-like girls out in the audience. This beautiful man comes out, and there's these two seductresses that come out after him, and they're up on the balcony, and they're dancing, and they're seducing him and playing with him and teasing him, and there's this whole dance that happens. Well, Well, while he's not paying attention and he's like getting into the seduction of it all and playing with these women, what he doesn't realize is that these women are pulling out this red crocheted rope and they're slowly binding him up in it and entangling him in the rope. And one by one, they start strapping his arms up and his appendages up where he can no longer move. Well, the man being seduced by the women is getting entangled in the web. Pan comes out and grabs some red ribbon and he covers his eyes. And at that point, the girls that are out in the audience start pulling out red ribbons and passing them out to the people out on the dance floor. And they're not quite sure what's going on. And then Pan points to the man being entangled up on the balcony. And one of the girls jumps on his back and strangles him and kills him, and he didn't even see it coming. That show was interesting because I think in a lot of ways that was my way of crying out that there was a problem. I think in a lot of ways I was speaking in volumes what was going on inside myself, and I don't think a lot of people were listening. I think some of the people involved in the show were kind of confused by what was going on or why, or some of them just didn't question, or they were like, there's some dark shit she's trying to like sort through. But no one really addressed it head on. So that's the story of the Medusa show. That was in February of 2004. It was Valentine's night of all nights to do it.
Now we have DJ Beans from Los Angeles, California.
2 weeks after the show, I had a complete meltdown and trashed my whole entire room and took 2 boxes of sleeping pills and climbed into a bathtub. I was found several hours later in the hallway between the kitchen and the living room and the staircase up to my room. I was half dead and slipping from my body.
California. Get in your booth right now. We have DJ B.
A month later, it was time to decide whether or not I was going to head back down to Southern California and do Southern Fair with RedAnt Fashions and my mom. I went ahead and decided to go ahead and do Southern Fair, and that was the last year that RedAnt had a booth at the Renaissance Fair. That fair was really interesting for me because I don't think people really knew what was going on or what I had just come out of.